Alright guys, well today I have a 2009, it's a Chevy Malibu with a 3.6 liter V6, and this vehicle has a intermittent no start condition. During a cold start the vehicle starts up just fine and normal, but after driving it for about 30 minutes, half an hour, once the temperature starts to rise under the hood, the vehicle becomes a no crank. So when you shut the car off after it's been warmed up and you go to start it again, the vehicle will not crank. And so in this case, what we needed to rule out, a couple different things. The customer actually replaced the starter on this vehicle, but to no avail. It still had the same problem. And so one of the things that I wanted to check is and I'm sorry I'm shooting this after the fact, but what I wanted to check was my voltage at the S terminal on the starter when the key is being turned on, or excuse me, when the key is in the crank position while the fault is occurring. And so when I did that, I saw that we had no control voltage at the starter on the S terminal. And so that led me back to the fuse box where the relay for the starter lives, and did my basic checks. The first thing that I checked on the relay is do I have voltage on pin 30, which is my power feed, and I do. And again, I'm sorry I'm shooting this after the fact, but the point here that I'm trying to make is that I have good control coming from the computer, but I have a bad ground on the control side, and because I know by looking at the wiring diagram that this ground is shared also by the wiper motor, and the wiper motors function properly while this fault is occurring. My problem more than likely has to be somewhere inside of the fuse box. So right now I'm in the middle of disassembling the fuse box. This is where the starter relay lives here, and I actually have it taken apart just simply for the ease of testing it. As you can see, this is the magnetic coil. I have a T-pin actually slid onto the pin 86 terminal here, but just an easy way for me to do my checks. So next up is dismantling this or taking apart this fuse box, because this is a UBEC style fuse box. It's a bus center. I believe our problem may be inside, so yeah, I'm going to take this apart. Alright, so what I have is the fuse box disassembled, the UBEC style fuse box, and you can see it's sort of like a network of this copper wire that has two sides to it, and the fuses connect to it, and so do the relays, and you can see I've removed all the fuses and the relays here. Kind of looks like a little science experiment here. I've got my power supply, so I'm going to do a little bit of bench testing here. Alright, so if we focus in over here, this here is pin 30, which is the power feed to the relay here. This here is pin 86, I believe, which is the power feed that comes from the computer to the control side of the relay. And this here is the ground. This pin right here is for the is going straight down to the starter, but this pin right here is to a ground. Now if you can see, the copper wire leads down to here, which is the feed from the PCM. So we know by doing our checks that this power feed wire here is good, and our bias voltage shows up, and so does our command when you crank the key. But here we know we have a ground problem, and you can see that the wire is exposed on this side, but the wire is not exposed. It's actually on the back side. So what we'll do is we'll reference this point here that's an open slot, and it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4, the fourth slot up. If I turn it around, this wire right here, excuse me, this pin right here, so as you can see, this wire is connected to it, and if we follow it up, it goes up this way and up to this pin right here. We don't really have a diagram for this, and I don't see any immediate signs of discoloration or burning on any of the copper wire, which is kind of what I was hoping for. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and power up the circuit, and I'm going to see if we have a problem. What I'm doing now at this point is I'm running current through the circuit, and I can actually go anywhere here along the wire and touch it, and then I can get a reading on my scope here. And so what I'm basically going to do is just kind of go down the line here. Well, right now everything seems to be functioning properly. So what I'm really waiting for is for this light to dim or just go out altogether, and then I'll know that we have a problem here. So, what I'm doing is running current through the circuit, and that's going to heat up the wire, and hopefully the heat will cause this thing to lose connection. Alright guys, so with my contraption set up, I've been running current flow through this circuit for about half an hour now. As you can see, the light is still bright. So the amount of current flow that flows through this here is roughly about the amount of current flow that you'll see on the relay circuit. But I'm kind of changing my my attack here because I know that current flow is not the only thing that can affect it, and actually there is no current flow on this particular circuit while the vehicle is running. So we know it's not so much that the heat from the current flow could cause high resistance in this circuit, but the temperature inside the engine compartment can be affecting it. And so that's an important factor here, is I need to be able to recreate the heat condition that we have inside of the vehicle, or excuse me, under the hood, in the engine compartment. So what I have is actually a heat gun that I'm going to use, and I'm just going to keep it on a low level on the single single dash on the trigger here. So I'll keep the heat low, and we'll just watch the meter here. If you look, what I have is my lead hooked on to the ground side of this circuit here, and I'm basically just going to heat it up with a heat gun, and we're going to watch to see if our voltage drops out. Again, we're going to check to see if our light goes out at the same time. So maybe I can get an overhead view here. So I'm just going to kind of heat up the board here. You can just watch the meter, or I don't know if you can see the light. And we're just trying to recreate the underhood temperature here. And again, I'm just on a low setting. Just kind of move the heat gun around and let the heat dissipate around the board here. And as you can see, our light just went out and our voltage just dropped to 0. So heat is definitely the culprit here. Now, while the circuit is open, is a good time to check to see if we can find where the open is in the circuit. So I'm going to shut the heat gun off. I'm going to take my lead from my voltmeter, and I'm just going to kind of go along the copper wire on the circuit here and check to see where our voltage splits off here. So right here, we'll check it here. As you can see, I've got 14 or 14.9 volts. I'm going to go down the line here. Looks good. That looks good. That looks good. And nothing here. So from this point to this point, somewhere in between here, and you know what? It's pretty evident. I can see it. If you look closely, there's a hairline crack right there on that copper wire. Let's see if I can get a better shot of this here. Right where that wire bends, excuse me for the movement here, but right where this wire bends, if you look, there's a hairline crack. Alright, maybe I can zoom it in with the camera here. There you are. Now it's pretty evident where our problem is. So what's happening is that the heat contracts, the heat expands the copper, and when it cools down, it contracts and it reconnects. So I bet you if we wait a moment, this light should actually come back on. Let's see if, just by letting it cool off. We'll just give it a moment here. Let me blow on it here. Maybe I can speed up the process. Let me just focus you in on the test light. There we go. Wow. Simply letting it cool down for a moment, we've regained connectivity. I'm going to go ahead and grab my meter here. Again, there's our hairline crack right there. And I'm going to measure before, then I'm going to measure after. And so there it is. We have a hairline crack in this wire that's causing an open in the circuit when the board begins to heat up due to underhood temperature. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to attempt to repair that with some solder. Then I'm going to heat test it again, make sure the solder doesn't come apart. Try to save this customer from having to buy a new fuse panel here, because this thing is actually really pricey. It is not just a regular fuse box. This is a bus network type fuse box. So they get really pricey. And this actually is not designed to be taken apart. I actually had to grind away these pieces here with the grinder. I used a file here on my drill to get these pieces out so that I could actually separate the box and open it up to expose the inside and the inner workings of it. And you know, all doing this without a wiring diagram or any type of schematic for this board. We just figured out what our problem is, and we'll go from there.